is I/O. This one, if you can select I/O, this is mainly going to be helpful for maintenance, but it might be helpful to know that it's there. If you're checking for the function of a switch or something like this, you can go to cockpit, say DI for digital input, DO for digital output, AI for analog input, AO for analog output. So digital means either on or off, and analog means it's a continuously changing variable. So you can go to digital input, say the start button isn't working, you can ask the pilot to keep pressing the start button and just check to see if the light turns green when the button is pressed. But mainly for maintenance, so I won't focus too much on this now. We can close this. And again, interlocks. You can select interlocks. There are 3 different user levels. There's an administrator, maintenance, and operator user level. Right now I'm logged in as an operator user level. So all I can do on this screen is view the interlocks. This is a list of all of the software interlocks that we have in the system, and it tells you if it's checking. If it's not checking in a particular state, it says not applicable, and you'll see these change as you go from the system in this state to when you enable motion, it begins to check some more interlocks, and it should always either say pass or not applicable. If you happen to see it change to fail, it could say fail or waiting for clear, meaning that it's waiting for a condition to be cleared, or it's waiting for the operator to press a button to clear the interlock. If you click this drop down, we have showed all interlocks, only failed interlocks, only interlocks which have a warning, which means failed, but it's not going to keep you from proceeding. Waiting for clear, pass, bypassed, and not applicable. So for maintenance and administrator users, there's an additional column here, and you can select bypass. Bypassing interlocks is also more of a maintenance function. This isn't something the operator should ever have to do. But if, for example, you removed the right side console to do maintenance on it, and you wanted to be able to do training even with it removed, you could bypass the interlocks that are checking to make sure it's locked up or down, because you know there's no safety issue, it's not going to fall or anything like this. So you might bypass the interlocks in that case. But that would be very rare. Okay, the next one we already looked at is built-in self-test. So bus diagnostics, this one is also primarily for maintenance. Interbus is the I/O system that we use to get the majority of the system information. CAN bus is the other I/O system we use. CAN bus is only for talking to the drives and also for the sticks, Hal? Yeah. So the CAN bus is a little bit quicker than Interbus, and to minimize the delay, the pilots are good at sensing if there's too much delay. So this is done by CAN bus also. But the Interbus screen will look like this unless there's some kind of fault, in which case it sometimes gives you additional information about the fault. If you click on drive diagnostics, this tells you motion information coming from each of the axes. This is, the top half is axes, like the pilot would be used to calling them, kind of aircraft axes. And the bottom half is actuator position. So we have the 3 actuators around the middle do not correspond directly to pitch and roll. So that's why this information can be different than this information. And if you go to CAN, this tells you information about each of the connections to the drives. So the language that we use, drive, is short for servo drive, where the servo is the feedback loop. It gets the motor position and continually tries to control the position. So when we talk about drive diagnostics, that's what we're talking about. You don't need to know this for operation purposes, but sometimes if you're diagnosing a communication issue, this screen can be helpful. Good morning. If you go to history, this will show you since the GUI has started. This is not a history back forever, but just since the GUI started in the morning, if there were any faults on the system drives. When you first start the system up, or first start the GUI up, it's not unusual to get some errors showing up here as communication is first established. So in general, you can ignore what will be here, but if you ever did have a drive fault, the interlock message that will be on the main GUI screen will just say drive fault, and if you come to this screen, you can get some more detailed information. Let's go down to start at real-time log. Real-time log. So the computer, the maintenance computer always records any flights that we have with motion, and it records all of the system I/O, all of the relevant system I/O for motion. When you start a run, the log is started, and when you stop a run, the log is ended. If you ever wanted to record something while there's no motion, like right now, for example, or if you wanted to have a log that spanned many runs, just one log, you have the option to switch instead of automatic, you can switch to manual, and then you have a start and stop button for this logging function. Very unusual that you would have to use something like this. It would be for troubleshooting a specific problem. Generally, automatic is perfect.
Where can we see the actual log that has been recorded?
We'll show you that too. That'll be a separate tool called Log Manager. I may not get to that today, but we'll cover that in detail also. You can see there are some menu items that are disabled for the operator user level. So we will log out and log in as the maintenance level user to come back and demonstrate those. Change history. This is a log of all of the editable software parameters for the system. If you want to find out why something that was working fine has suddenly stopped working fine, you can come here and see if somebody's changed the tolerance. Maybe the tolerance used to be, the system monitors to make sure when it commands a pitch motion that the device actually creates a pitch motion, and there's some tolerance, maybe 2 degrees, and maybe somebody changed this tolerance to 1/2 degree, and now the system says that there's frequent pitch tracking errors. You might come here and say, I know why that is. Somebody's changed something. So you can, this has, it will keep track of the user who was logged in, when the change was made, the date, what the value was, and what it was changed to. And this includes calibration values, interlock bypasses, pretty much anything that it can affect the operation of the system. So this is also helpful for tracking down problems sometimes. Communication status. This one is also only going to be useful for maintenance purposes. You won't have to, the operators are not likely to have to come to understand this. But if you get a message that says, I have an error model communication error, or I have a GUI computer communication error, these are some of the problems that might be listed here. Generally, the first thing to check is that the Ethernet cable is plugged in at both ends and that the software is running on both machines. If you've checked that and you still can't figure out why they're not talking to each other, you can come here. This is a list of the computers, the software on each computer, and how it is trying to send and receive communication to the other computers. Connected means good. And there's one that was disconnected. Maintenance is disconnected because the maintenance software does not automatically start with the system. So actually, as a demonstration, if you want, I can show you where the maintenance software is located, and we can watch the status change as you bring that up. If you go to the C drive, please, and the gyro IPT folder, maintenance, sorry, it was the next one higher. And at the very bottom, this is the same way all of the software is organized. There's gyro IPT folder on every system computer. Inside gyro IPT, there's a folder for every application that runs. And inside each application folder, there's a batch file that will launch the software with whatever arguments are necessary to launch it. So you can always launch the software with this batch file. And if you switch back to the communication status screen, we can see maintenance is now connected. I won't talk about maintenance software now, that'll come later. So the communication status screen, the only thing I want you to remember is that it's here. If you have a communication issue, it can be helpful. You don't need to understand more than that, where it can be found. Okay, pilots. So we can have a database of pilots. If you have pilots that come for repeated training, or if you have a record that you want to keep, then you can use this to create your database of pilots. It's not necessary to use it if it's not useful for the way that you keep your records, but it's available if you want to do that. If you click the new pilot screen,
But I open new pilot from here, or when I start a mission?
both. Both are okay. You don't have to
Okay.
enter it here first.
Perfect. Yeah.
So you can type the pilot name, any information about maybe why they're receiving the training, or whatever you need to type in for the note. And aircraft type would be not necessarily what aircraft they're flying here, because that gets logged separately, but what aircraft they have been trained to fly. What aircraft
All
they
of these
actually
fields
fly.
are unchecked and are free text.
That's correct.
All right.
But aircraft type I don't put when I upload training. I only choose one.
Yes. So for example, you might have a pilot whose aircraft type is CH-53,
Yeah.
but when they come here, they will fly UH-60.
So this will be from automatically over here.
No.
Oh no, this is gonna be empty.
You can leave it empty, or you can type CH-53.
כן, אבל על הפרופיל אין לך אופציה. אז אני חייב להגיע לפה, זה מה שאני אומר. בסדר. אוקיי.
Okay. And of course, you can change pilot information or delete entries with the delete and edit buttons. Okay. User, the only thing, except for administrator, when you're logged in as operator or maintenance, the only thing you can do is change your password. The administrator can create users, delete users. We'll show that in a little bit.
Something. How did the displays change when no one pressed anything in the cockpit? Is part of the profile?
This is when there is no profile loaded, it will show this view. So it won't change until we go to start a profile.
Regardless of aircraft, it will show this view.
No, for C1, what are we on? C-130.
Yes.
C-130. Okay.
So users, it's understand.
Yes. Okay. So
אפסים.
I'll cover sound recording later when we talk about profiles.
Sounds code, okay.
Same for initial conditions, direct control profile, and SD profiles. We'll cover these in more detail
Okay.
later. So we can click out of here. Let's end this session and we'll talk about the session setup window. So an operator can only do training. Maintenance and admin users can also select maintenance sessions. The difference is for a training session, you can do basically all of the types of motion that we've seen during the testing that we've been doing the last couple of days. So you can do the direct control and you can do SD illusions or free flight profiles. You can always do motion on or off, manned and unmanned. The primary difference for manned and unmanned is whether you get to select the aircraft type because you're flying from the console, and also whether the recording system will
Wait, again,
record.
so what does maintenance session type allow you to do that?
Maintenance session type will allow me to move the cranks, to control the cranks manually,
All right.
essentially. So we will show that also shortly. So manned, unmanned, the console controls versus the controls inside, and also the recording system. For an unmanned flight, we do not start the recording. Night vision active. When you select this box, it changes the software running inside the cockpit for the out the window scene, so that it's using the special software that is designed to stimulate the goggles. So instead of just the black screen with some lights here, we add red intentionally to the scene that stimulates the goggles. Night vision active also switches off the IR camera inside. It turns off some of the other lighting inside. And I think that's all. Oh, no. The backlights for all 5 monitors inside the cockpit. The 3 out the window display, the chin monitor, and the IDS. The backlight, they're dimmable. So instead of just, this is different from when you dim with the buttons on the monitor, it just adjusts the contrast essentially. This actually changes the light level so that it's not so bright for the goggles. Okay, if you select manned, then you can type in this information here. If you don't want to type it in and you have a database, you can click that to bring it here.
Okay.
For now, let's do unmanned.
Aircraft type also have. Okay.
Yes.
This is aircraft.
Okay.
Thank you.
Okay. Let's go to session setup. And okay. If you forget how you have your session configured, you can see here we're in a training session with motion off, unmanned. Aircraft type is not selected yet.
Because it's not part of the session, it's part of the profile.
Yes.
All right.
Default IG means normal daytime, nighttime, not night vision. The profile name will come later also. Training time is a like a stopwatch, so this counts up from when you've started the profile and today's date in case you forget. Okay, this part of the screen shows the current position and velocity of each axis. Surge and sway are, this device only has 4 degrees of freedom, but we show 6 here, and that's because we can give a surge and a sway cue using these axes. So we can attempt to simulate surge with roll and heave and pitch, and sway with, I have that backwards, sway with roll and heave, and surge with pitch and heave. And that they're measured in distances because of the effect of the the linear cue. In the middle, we have the pilot's flight controls. The instructor can always see the throttle, stick, landing gear, speed brakes and flaps position, toe brakes, and the rudder.
A question: the top part is aero model data or physical drive data?
Physical device data. So this is the motion the pilot is experiencing.
But there is no physical sway or surge, so where did the numbers come from?
It's the effective surge and sway. So from
But it can't be physical, so it must be logical, something.
it's a combined cue. So when you sit and the pivot point is down
No,
here.
I understand how you can simulate one with the other, but if this is hardware, then it can't be anything other than zero. If it's not hardware, then it comes from somewhere else, the aero model or something.
It's the motion, forward and sideways motion of the pilot at their.
So if there were accelerometers in the cockpit, that's what they would show?
Yes.
All right.
It's a result of two forces, right? Basically. Yeah.
Right.
It's derived, but it's still there. It's just a combination of two other forces.
Actually, because the pitch axis and roll axis pivot from below the pilot, every time we have pitch and roll, we also have surge and sway. The number of throttles changes according to the number of throttles installed. At the console, we have only one throttle all the time. You can see on the rudder pedals, there's a thin red line on both. This red line shows the trim setting. This line also exists for pitch and roll. It does not appear until you move the trim away from the center position.
So it shows you the actual trim area
Right.
position.
We didn't talk about the toe brakes and the rudder pedals when we were inside. Toe brakes means that you're using your toes to push the pedals forward, and they generally apply the brakes on, the right brake applies the brakes on the right side, and the left toe brake applies the brakes on the left. So when you're taxiing, they can be used to steer a little bit. And that's these on the side of the rudder. The console pedals here also have toe brakes. Right now, only the instructor controls show green. These are grayed out. That's because we are unmanned, so its default selection is the instructor controls. If we run a manned selection, it will be the opposite. These will be green and these will be gray. It is also possible to control two aircraft at the same time, so we'll show that also. And mid-flight, if you have a manned session and you start with the pilot controls active, the instructor can click the instructor button, and now the instructor will fly. And then you can click the pilot button and give control back to the pilot. Over here, we have 3 plots. One for pitch and roll, one for our linear motion, which is heave, surge, and sway, and one for yaw velocity. Actually, this default configuration can change. By default, we are showing the profile, any pre-programmed motion contained by the profile, and we're also showing the actual position of the axes. The pre-programmed position can be different than what we call our commanded position. So the command that goes to the drive to create the actual position is the pre-programmed information plus the aero model calculations. So that's why you can see the command being different from the profile sometimes because of the aero model effect. We can also, Boris, if you can right-click, and the right-click menu gives you some more options. It is rare that you'll have to change any of these, especially for operation. Even for maintenance, there are several other ways that we can plot this information. But in case it's interesting, I'll show you just the basics now. We won't have to do data or auto scale, but if we click settings, settings lets us, if you can click the bottom and drag it down. So for each of these axes, we can choose to plot position or velocity, and we can choose to plot the command, the profile, and the actual. We can plot all of these or just some of these. You can adjust the colors and the size. The axis is this caret that points to the left is telling us that these curves are plotted on the left-hand axis. These carets that are pointed to the right, by default, velocities get plotted over here and positions get plotted over here, but you can switch that. You can change the grid spacing, the appearance, but almost always if I need to make any change to these plots, it's only going to be from this screen. Okay, we can close this and right click on the plot again, please. We can export data right from the plot. Export plot means like taking a screenshot. Export data means a file with the numbers so you can open it in Excel or some other program. Real time is always checked by default. That means that as the profile is running, the plot will always show the next series of data, and it will let the old data disappear. If you uncheck real time, then the plot will be frozen. You'll see the data continue, and you won't see the data after it pulls up the plot. Cursor, if we click on cursor, now you have a thin line here. So this is zoom. Click and drag is zoom. Middle click goes back, and right click. I'm sorry. I'm going to have to because I know I can do it, but there it is. There we go. Control. Okay, control click. So if you hold control and move the cursor, I'll let you try, Boris. This gives you some information up here. It tells you how much time is between your cursors, and it tells you the values where the curves cross the right and left sides. Okay. Any questions so far? I know this is a lot. It is all in the manuals also. You can stop me anytime though if I'm not going slow enough.
We're gonna stop you when you go to lunch.
You can stop me to go to lunch anytime.
Oh, in 5 minutes then.
Okay. Okay, actually, I think that's good for now.
Okay.
When we come back, we'll talk more about the profiles and simulation menu.